sun had barely warmed the sleepy cul-de-sac when Max Baer stepped out of his garage, coffee in hand, admiring the still gleam of his graphite gray Lamborghini. The car wasn't just a vehicle, it was a reward, a symbol of years of brutal hours, late nights, and sacrifice. He didn't drive it every day, but he did admire it every morning like a favorite painting. This morning should have been no different. Then came the sound, a sharp, high-pitched screech. Tires spinning on pavement. Fast. Too fast. Max froze, hard lurching. A second later came the unmistakable thud of metal meeting something that refused to move. He ran. What he saw made the coffee drop from his hand and splash across the pavement. His Lamborghini, his pride, was wrapped halfway around a fire hydrant at the end of the block. The back half of the car was nearly torn apart, the rear axle twisted unnaturally. But that wasn't the worst part. It was who stood beside it. Jaden Prescott, 17 years old, hoodie on backward, holding a phone like it was a trophy. And standing just behind him, arms crossed and face already fuming, was Karen Prescott, HOA president and the unofficial queen of the subdivision. Max's chest tightened. What the hell happened? Jaden looked up, shrugged. I was trying to move it so it wouldn't block the sidewalk. Thought I was helping. Max stared at the mangled car, then at Jaden. You broke into my garage, started my car, and drove it full throttle into a hydrant, and now you're saying you were helping? Karen stepped forward, already in full defense mode. Don't raise your voice. Jaden was trying to correct your violation. This car shouldn't be parked on your driveway overnight. Per HOA Code 1-4B, visible sports cars overnight are considered visible. Max cut in. It was inside the gate. On my property. She didn't blink. We have full authority to maintain neighborhood aesthetics. Jaden was acting on that authority. Max looked between them, jaw locked tight. He could barely hear, over the rush of blood in his ears. Every instinct in him screamed that this wasn't an accident, it was a setup. But the Prescotts weren't done yet. Karen turned toward a small gathering of neighbors who trickled out to see the chaos. He left the keys in the car. It was unlocked. That's a liability issue. Not just an HOA problem, it's a public safety risk. Max couldn't believe what he was hearing. She wasn't just excusing it, she was turning the blame. Jaden smirked behind her. One of the neighbors whispered to another, and Max saw the doubt starting to spread. This was exactly how Karen operated, control the narrative before the truth has a chance to breathe. His fists curled. The HOA had tried many things before: harassment, fines, threats over long height, but this was personal. This was theft, and they were already painting him as the villain. He didn't speak. He just walked back to his garage, silent, fuming. If they thought this was over, they had no idea who they were dealing with. He opened a locked drawer in the workbench and pulled out a small device, a security hard drive. Every frame from every angle recorded and stored. He didn't have to explain anything. He just had to show what really happened. And when he did, not even Karen's iron grip on, the HOA would be able to protect her son. Not this time. But what Max didn't know yet was that the HOA had already filed a formal violation. They were planning to hit him with property damage fines for the hydrant. And Karen had already called the insurance company with her version of the story. He was in a race against something far more dangerous than just lies. He was in a race against a narrative being rewritten in real time, and someone had just hit record. By the time Max finished pulling the footage from the security hard drive, his phone had already started lighting up with HOA emails. The first subject line read, "Immediate violation notice, unauthorized vehicle parking incident, action required." He opened it. The language was sterile, almost rehearsed. Your vehicle, a non-compliant high-value automobile, was improperly stored in visible space, breaching aesthetic code 1-4B. Furthermore, failure to secure your vehicle resulted in significant property damage to community infrastructure. It went on like that, for paragraphs of twisted logic, shifting liability from the Prescott boy who'd stolen and crashed the Lamborghini to Max. His insurance company had also emailed We've received a claim filed by Karen Prescott regarding the damage to public property caused by your vehicle. Please respond with your version of the events immediately. Max leaned back in his chair. The footage was still downloading, but the parts that had already since made one thing clear. Jaden had climbed over the side fence at 5:14 a.m., used a thin bar to trip the latch on the garage side door, and strolled straight to the car like it was his dot. The camera caught him fumbling with the car for several minutes. Max hadn't left the keys in the ignition. He wasn't stupid. But Jaden had found the spare set that Max thought was hidden behind the shelving unit. Max remembered stashing them there during a house party 6 months ago, and clearly, Jaden had known exactly where to look. He hadn't just taken the car. He planned to. Max knew exactly what was happening. Karen was attempting to drown him in HOA violations, fake liability, and enough red tape to confuse the truth before it ever surfaced. She knew how to weaponize community rules. He'd seen her destroy people over basketball hoops, porch decorations, even the color of mailbox flags. Now it was his turn. Later that afternoon, Max went to the HOA office conveniently located inside Karen's converted pool house. He knocked once, twice. No answer. But the door creaked open. Inside, stacks of violation forms were already printed and arranged on clipboards. On one of them, Max caught his address listed on the top right corner. Repeat offender was handwritten in the margin. He took a picture. Just then, Karen's voice echoed from behind him. Entering without appointment violates HOA protocol. Max turned slowly. You've got a whole war room set up to frame me for your son's crime. Karen crossed her arms. You had an unsecured exotic car. No gate code update. Your garage was unlocked. No. Max cut in, stepping forward. Your son broke in. That's felony theft and trespass. You're covering for him because you're scared of what happens if people see who he really is. Karen didn't flinch. You really think anyone in this neighborhood will believe your story over mine? I built this HOA. These people trust me. I send out the newsletter. Max nodded slowly. He wasn't surprised. What surprised him was how confident she was. But Karen didn't know about the footage yet. He didn't say another word, just left. That night, Max uploaded the security footage and edited to a private YouTube channel. He sent the link to his insurance company, his attorney, and a local news tip line. Then he posted one still frame to his neighborhood Facebook group. It showed Jaden mid-climb over the gate, hand gripping the fence, face fully visible. The caption was simple. This is how my Lamborghini got stolen. Ask your HOA president why she's blaming me. The post caught fire within hours. By morning, it had over 60 comments. Several neighbors were already expressing doubts. One even mentioned they'd seen Jaden walk in the neighborhood that morning in Karen's Lexus with no license plates. Someone else added that their security camera had caught him jumping fences before. Karen responded in a comment thread, calling it deeply edited, misleading content, and claimed Max was harassing a minor with doctored footage. But it was too late. The cracks in her wall were starting to show still. Max knew the real battle hadn't even begun, because the next violation letter came with something new: a formal summons to the HOA's monthly meeting, with a proposal to strip Max of community privileges due to aggressive behavior, endangerment, and digital harassment. They were turning defense into attack. The only question left was, how far would Karen go to protect her son, and just how much of her empire was Max willing to burn to the ground to make the truth heard? The whole meetings were normally dull, painfully so, folding chairs, stale coffee, and the same dozen neighbors pretending to care about mulch depth and trash bin visibility. But tonight's meeting was different. The parking lot outside the clubhouse was overflowing. Even the retirees, who usually avoided drama, had shown up early, clutching their HOA newsletters like courtroom evidence. Max arrived 5 minutes before it started, dressed in jeans and a quiet calm that didn't match the storm. Inside him, tucked under his arm, was a USB drive in a small black case. He didn't greet anyone, just nodded and walked to the front row. Every eye followed him. Whispers scattered like dry leaves. Karen sat on the raised platform with her usual still posture, flanked by her Vice President Lau, who never spoke unless prompted, and Treasurer Sharon, who mostly clicked her pen and nodded along. But even Karen looked different tonight, more rehearsed, less smug-eyed. At exactly 7 p.m., she tapped her clipboard. Let's bring this meeting to order. The first 10 minutes were routine, almost aggressively so. Approval of minutes, landscaping budget, broken gate code upgrades. Max sat, still, eyes on her dot. Then Karen's voice shifted. Now, we come to item 7B, community conduct review of homeowner Max Barrett. There was, she stood, unfolding a typed statement. It has come to the board's attention that Mr. Barrett has repeatedly engaged in behavior harmful to the aesthetic and moral fabric of this community. Max raised his hand. May I respond? Not until I'm finished, she said. Too quickly. Your online posts include unauthorized images of a minor, inflammatory language, and edited surveillance videos. They're not edited, Max said. They're time-stamped, unaltered, and legal, and I brought the original files with me. He held up the black case. Karen's eye twitched, but she pressed on, and Mr. Barrett's refusal to secure a dangerous high-speed vehicle resulted in thousands of dollars in public infrastructure damage, which our insurance provider is now contesting due to contributory negligence. A low murmur swept through the room. Max stood. Let me show you what actually happened. He walked to the projector table. Karen tried to interrupt, but this time, people shushed her. Sharon hesitated, then clicked the input button. The footage began. It was silent. Just the grainy black and white view of Max's side yard camera. Everyone saw Jaden jump the fence, slip inside, and head to the garage. Then came the garage footage. Jaden entering with a flashlight, rummaging through the shelves, then holding up the spare keys like he'd found treasure. Finally, he got into the car, started it, and reversed, nearly clipping the side post on his way out. When the car hit the hydrant, people gasped. Karen's face had gone pale. Max let the footage play to the end, then paused it on the freeze frame. Jaden stepping out of the wrecked Lamborghini with the smugness of someone who thought the world would clean up after him. No one spoke for several seconds. Then a voice from the back spoke. So, he really stole it. Karen tried to recover. This footage doesn't tell the full story. The child was acting in defense of HOA standards. He broke into the garage. Someone snapped. A second voice. You said he was moving it because it was illegally parked. That's not what this shows. Karen's voice rose. You're all letting a slick video manipulate you. He staged this. Max wants revenge. He's always resented the rules here. Max turned to the room. I've paid every fine. I've trimmed my bushes to regulation. I even replaced my mailbox twice because the post wasn't HOA gray. But this isn't about rules anymore. This is about power. He held up his phone. What I didn't post online yet is that Jaden broke into my property with clear intent. I'd have footage from the day before showing him casing the fence. Karen knew what he did, and she tried to frame me. The room had shifted. Even Lau looked uncertain. Sharon stopped clicking her pen. Then, a woman near the middle stood up. Max recognized her. Mrs. Dawson. She rarely spoke. Her voice shook slightly. I caught Jaden breaking my garden lights last month. When I brought it up to Karen, she said I must have imagined it. Maybe I didn't. Karen turned red. This is a coordinated attack. Another voice chimed in. I had a package stolen last week. Saw someone matching Jaden's build on my ring cam. Karen tried to regain control. None of this is relevant. The point is, Max still violated Code 1 for B. Max stepped closer. Let me guess. Code 1 for B is whatever Karen says it is. A laugh broke out in the crowd. Karen's control was slipping fast. And then came the moment that changed everything. A young man in the back raised his hand. I work with the county infrastructure office. That hydrant wasn't damaged by Max's car. It was already flagged for repair. The city was set to replace it this month. The damage was cosmetic. Silence. Karen's mouth open, but no words came out. Max just watched her. He knew this wasn't the end. Not yet, but for the first time, Karen knew it too. She wasn't untouchable anymore. The next morning felt different. For the first time in weeks, Max wasn't waking up to an inbox flooded with violation notices or HOA threats. There was a strange calm outside. No morning golf cart patrol, no Lyle measuring grass with a ruler, no neighborhood texts whispering behind his back. But Max knew better than to mistake silence for surrender. Karen wasn't the kind to back down. She was the type to regroup, retaliate, and strike harder. He just didn't know how or when. The answer came at noon. An official envelope arrived via certified mail. Inside was a cease and desist letter, not from the HOA, but from a private law firm Karen had used before. It accused Max of public defamation, character attacks against a minor, and demanded the removal of all surveillance footage within 48 hours or face civil litigation. He smirked. It was a desperate swing, but it was also a warning. Karen wasn't going to let this go quietly, and she wasn't just fighting to protect her son anymore. She was fighting for control, her image, her authority. Everything she built in this neighborhood relied on people fearing the fine print more than they trusted the facts. But Max had been digging ever since the whole meeting. He'd been combing through the HOA's public filings, meeting minutes, and the most overlooked weapon in any bureaucratic battlefield, the bylaws. Over 70 pages of vague language, poorly updated regulations, and buried loopholes that Karen had been manipulating for years. That night, Max drove to the county registrar's office. It was nearly empty. A board clerk handed him a manila folder containing the original HOA charter from over 2 decades ago. Inside it were the documents that legally created the Prescott Ridge HOA signatures, parcel maps, amendment trails. One paragraph stood out. It referenced a provision labeled Article 12, subsection C, a clause that stated any HOA officer found using community resources or influence for personal gain could be suspended without vote, pending investigation. The punishment extended to any family member receiving non-transparent benefit, including monetary, property, or unregulated access to homeowner assets. It hit him like a brick. Karen, using her position to pressure neighbors, excused Jaden's behavior, and lied to the insurance company. Those weren't just manipulations. If tied to her son's actions, they were grounds for removal. But he needed proof that community resources were directly tied to the cover-up. That night, Max sat on his porch watching neighborhood lights go out one by one. At exactly 11:15 p.m., a black SUV rolled slowly past his driveway. It wasn't a coincidence. It was the third night in a row someone circled his home at nearly the same time. Jaden, or someone sent by Karen. Max opened his laptop. He drafted an email to the HOA board, not to Karen, but directly to Lyle and Sharon. He attached a short message, Article 1 to see, review the clause. I'm filing a formal ethics complaint against the president and requesting a suspension hearing. Documents attached. Then he hit send. The next morning, Max received a reply from Sharon. It was brief, but it was enough. We'll schedule a private board session. This must remain confidential until reviewed. He smiled. That same afternoon, the neighbors approached Max during his walk. They'd seen the footage. They'd seen Karen's reaction. One of them, Mrs. Singh, had even brought her own printed HOA violation reports, 3 years worth, and she pointed out how her family had been repeatedly fined for things Karen's friends weren't. Max invited them in over coffee. They formed a plan, gather more homeowners, compare notes, identify patterns. They didn't need to take down Karen. They just needed to pull back the curtain far enough for the rest of the neighborhood to see what she'd really built. But they'd have to move fast, because by the end of the week, Karen escalated. A new violation appeared on Max's front door, bright red, taped like a scar, unsafe structure warning, unauthorized renovation activity. It referred to his garage, the one Jaden broke into. Karen was accusing Max of modifying his own home without HOA permits. She was trying to mark his property as non-compliant, which could trigger forced inspections, insurance issues, At potential foreclosure flags. It was more than retaliation. It was war. And Max was done playing defense. Max stared at the red violation taped to his garage like it was a personal challenge. Unauthorized renovation. That was bold even for Karen. The garage hadn't changed in 10 years, and she knew it, but she wasn't playing by the rules anymore. She was weaponizing them. This wasn't about cars or bylaws anymore. It was about who controlled the narrative, and right now, Karen still held enough strings to spin anything into HOA code. But Max was done reacting. Later that night, he met with two neighbors, Mrs. Singh and Mark Decker, inside his kitchen. Mark had a connection at the city auditor's office, and he'd requested a review of recent HOA filings under the local sunshine law. What they got back wasn't much at first. Then came the surprise. An old spreadsheet was tucked into the scanned files, a poorly formatted document titled Community Beautification Expenses, Discretionary Budget. It listed vague line items like fence maintenance, $1,800, youth civic projects, $2,300, an outreach grant, $3,000. But the most interesting line, security enhancements, $7,100, approved by Prez. No record of where that money went. No explanation. No receipt. Max leaned closer. This is the week after Jaden crashed the car. Mark nodded. And there's more. He pulled out his phone and opened a separate file, a list of vendor payments from the HOA's account. There was one registered to a security camera installer, but the address wasn't the clubhouse or common areas. It was Karen's house. Max sat back in his chair, heart pounding. Let me get this straight, he said. She used HOA funds, our dues, to upgrade her home's security system after her son broke into mine, and tried to bury the cost under a line item meant for the community. Mark nodded again. Mrs. Singh looked furious. That's embezzlement. And just like that, Max had what he needed. The next morning, Max delivered a sealed envelope to Lyle and Sharon's mailboxes. Inside, printed copies of the spreadsheet, the vendor list, a copy of the HOA's bylaws, and a formal demand to suspend Karen pending investigation under Article 12C. No bluff. No threats. Just evidence. The private board hearing was scheduled for Thursday night. It wasn't open to the public yet, but word spread anyway. People whispered about it at the dog park, passed messages during morning walks, and neighbors who hadn't spoken to Max in months now greeted him with quiet nods. He was no longer just the guy with the Lamborghini. He was the man standing up to Karen, and he wasn't alone anymore. The hearing was held in the back room of the HOA clubhouse. Max arrived with a calm that didn't match the stakes. He carried a flash drive in one hand and a folder in the other. Across the table sat Lyle, nervously adjusting his glasses, and Sharon, flipping through pages. Karen entered last. She looked tired, but composed. Wearing a pale pink blazer and holding a thick binder of rebuttals, she didn't look at Max. Lyle began. This is an informal board hearing regarding the conduct of President Karen Prescott. Following an ethics complaint submitted under Article 1C, Mr. Barrett, please present your findings. Max stood and connected his drive to the projector. He didn't speak for the first 30 seconds. He just clicked through images. First slide, the spreadsheet. Second slide, the vendor receipt. Third slide, HOA bylaw excerpt. Fourth slide, map showing the address tied to the security upgrade. Then he spoke. This isn't about me. It's about the whole, and whether the person leading it can use our dues to protect her son, silence her neighbors, and manipulate community standards to punish anyone who stands up to her. Karen raised her hand. This is out of context. I let you talk at the last meeting, Max said without turning. It's my turn now. She fell silent. Max continued. No approval vote. No disclosure. A $7,100 install listed as community safety, when the only place that got upgraded was her personal home. The same week her son illegally entered mine. Lyle looked sick. Sharon flipped another page, slower now. Max handed them both copies of the vendor invoice. Sharon finally looked up. Did you authorize this expenditure using discretionary power? Karen didn't deny it. I did. In good faith. The community was vulnerable after the incident. It was proactive. Max stepped forward. So the response to your son committing a crime was to upgrade your own cameras using our money while accusing me of endangerment. Karen's jaw clenched. Don Lau glanced at Sharon. Then he spoke. We need to take a vote. As of this moment, the motion on the table is to suspend Karen Prescott from all presidential duties pending legal and financial review of this expenditure. Karen laughed once, a short, bitter sound. You're seriously going to let him tear this place apart because his toy got scratched? No one answered her. La raised a hand. All in favor. Sharon didn't hesitate. Max stood in the silence that followed. No celebration, just something heavier. Truth. Karen rose slowly. Her eyes didn't meet his. She gathered her binder and walked out, but something in her posture made Max pause. She hadn't protested the vote. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't threatened, which meant she wasn't finished. She was planning something, and it wouldn't be subtle. The morning after Karen's suspension felt almost peaceful. For the first time in weeks, Max could stand on his porch without catching the icy glares of whole board members passing by in their golf carts. Neighbors waved. A few even crossed the street to chat small talk, weather, congratulations. But Max didn't trust the calm. Karen might have been temporarily removed, but power didn't vanish. It regrouped, and in Karen's case, it vanished behind curtains, silent, unseen, calculating. 2 days later, the first crack appeared. Max received an official letter not from the HOA, but from the city zoning office. It cited an anonymous complaint alleging that Max's garage had been structurally modified. Without permits, the complaint triggered a mandatory inspection, scheduled within 72 hours. It was the same garage Jaden had broken into. Max reread the letter twice, then drove straight to City Hall. The zoning official, a balding man with thick glasses and a flat tone, didn't offer much. Anonymous reports are common, he said. Usually a neighbor. We don't confirm identities. Can I at least see the report? No names, just the complaint. Garage addition created without structural permit approval. Max sat back. It's been untouched for years. The official shrugged. That's fine. But if the inspector finds anything electrical work, foundation changes, retrofits, you could be flagged for code violations. Max left with a hollow feeling. This wasn't an accident. It was Karen. She couldn't manipulate the whole board anymore, so she was pulling outside strings. And now, she was trying to bring the city into it. That night, Max called his contractor, Rick, a guy who worked on half the houses in the neighborhood, and a man who didn't scare easily. Rick came by the next morning and checked the garage, top to bottom. No illegal additions. Everything was permitted and signed off years ago, he said. But he frowned, lifting a section of drywall. This Pat's job. That's not mine. Max crouched beside him. The drywall was freshly painted, but the inside showed a set of wires poorly stapled across a wooden beam, rigged, exposed, and definitely not the code. His blood went cold. I didn't install that. Then someone else did. Rick muttered. It didn't make sense until it did. Jaden. When he broke in, he must have done more than just steal the keys. Maybe he installed something, maybe a camera or a listening device. Max checked the area thoroughly, but the wires led to a small, disconnected box behind the wall. No memory card, no power source. Just enough to look like an illegal install. Just enough for an inspector to flag it. Rick stared at him. Someone setting you up. Max nodded. I know who. The inspection was scheduled for Friday. That gave him 2 days. 2 days to clean up the damage, document the sabotage, and expose it before the city slammed him with violations he couldn't afford. He spent the next 24 hours rebuilding the drywall with Rick, labeling wires, printing the original garage blueprints. But he knew that wasn't enough. If Karen was bold enough to rig his property, she wouldn't stop there. And then it happened. On Thursday afternoon, Max received a foreclosure notice. Not from his bank, from the HOA as legal trustee, though Karen had been suspended. She had quietly filed lien paperwork a week earlier, falsely claiming that Max owed over $200 in accumulated violation fines. The paperwork was pending, and without a response, it would legally enable the HOA to begin foreclosure action under state HOA laws. Max's hands shook as he read the notice. She was trying to take his house. He drove straight to the county clerk's office and confirmed it. The lien had been filed just before her suspension. It hadn't been rescinded. Karen had set the trap in motion early, knowing it would tick down like a bomb, and Max had just days left before the fuse ran out. But he wasn't going to wait. That night, Max gathered every file he had: video evidence, HOA correspondence, contractor statements, photos of the sabotage. He compiled them into a massive digital packet and sent it to a real estate attorney who'd once helped a neighbor sue an HOA board member and win. Then he opened his phone. He recorded a short video, a quiet, composed statement. He told the story from the start: the theft, the crash, the false violation, the sabotage in his garage, and now the silent lien meant to steal his home. He posted it to his private YouTube channel. Then he sent the link quietly, strategically, to every member of the HOA, every neighbor who doubted him, and 3 local reporters. Within an hour, it had over 1,000 views. By morning, it would go viral. And this time, Karen wouldn't be the one controlling the narrative. Jason stared at the empty driveway where his Lamborghini had once gleamed, like a trophy of his hard work. Only oil stains remained, like scars on concrete. The HOA had launched a disciplinary hearing against him, and Karen's son, Kyle, was now spreading stories through the neighborhood that Jason had let him drive the car as some kind of cool neighbor favor. What the HOA didn't expect was Jason's silence and what he was preparing behind that calm demeanor. The night before the hearing, Jason visited Monica, a paralegal who worked downtown and had lived in the neighborhood long enough to know how HOA politics worked. Monica wasn't surprised by Karen's influence. "You're not the first neighbor she's railroaded," she told him, "but you might be the first with enough ammo to fight back." Jason opened his laptop and played the video files he'd stitched together. Footage from his Ring doorbell, to dashcam angles cinched together, and a GPS log from his phone proving he hadn't left the house the day of the crash. Monica's eyes widened. "You've got the full timeline?" she asked. "Down to the second," he replied. "And tomorrow, I'll let Karen finish her story before I end it." The HOA disciplinary hearing was set up in the community clubhouse. Folding chairs, cheap coffee, a projector. Karen sat at the head of the room, arms folded, her expression smug. Kyle wore a blazer 3 sizes too large, likely borrowed from his dad. There were 6 board members, and most neighbors were invited to observe, though few bothered. Jason, calm as ever, waited his turn. Karen cleared her throat. "We've gathered today because of a dangerous event that occurred on our streets." Mr. Jason Ford allowed an unlicensed minor to operate a high-performance vehicle within our neighborhood. That negligence could have endangered everyone's lives. Kyle nodded, rehearsed. "He said I could drive it. I told him I didn't know how, and he just laughed. He said, 'It's just a car, man, not a spaceship.' So I took it around the block like he said." A few murmurs from the board. Karen smirked, sensing control. Then Jason stood. "May I present a statement?" Karen waved a hand like a queen granting permission. "Go ahead." Jason connected his laptop to the projector. The lights dimmed. The first video played. Kyle walking up Jason's driveway, glancing over his shoulder, then manually opening the car door using tools. Jason paused the footage. "That's a lockpick," he said. "I found it discarded in my grass later that day. Now, this," he clicked again. Footage switched to the dash cam from inside the car, showing Kyle fumbling with the controls, panicking as he tried to start it. A timestamp in the corner matched Jason's GPS record showing he was at home. "I was inside with a neighbor on a video call when this happened," Jason added, flashing a log from his smart home system that tracked movement. His door hadn't opened for over an hour. The footage continued, Kyle racing the Lambo down the block before the impact with the hydrant. People in the room gasped. Karen jumped up. This is irrelevant. It doesn't prove anything except Jason's failure to secure his own property. Jason turned to the board. Actually, this proves two things. 1. I never gave permission. 2. Your son broke and entered, a felony. And if we're assigning blame, perhaps we should also consider that your influence over this HOA tried to silence a crime. The room went dead quiet. A board member cleared his throat. Ms. Prescott, were you aware your son accessed the car without permission? Karen tried to speak, but Kyle beat her to it. She told me to say he gave it to me, said if I took the blame, we'd lose the lawsuit. If I pin it on Jason, maybe we can negotiate. Gasps all around. Karen's face drained of color. A neighbor whispered, that boy just threw his mom under the bus. Jason looked at the board, his voice even. I'll be pressing charges against Kyle for theft and against Karen for falsifying statements. Karen tried to walk out, but one of the HOA members stopped her. You're not dismissed yet. Jason turned back to the room. There's something else. This HOA is broken. This is what happens when one family runs the neighborhood like it's a kingdom. The board fell into tense whispers. As Jason walked out of the clubhouse, Monica met him with a grin. Well, that escalated. Jason smiled. Oh, it's not over yet. I've got one last move. The courtroom was silent, save for the occasional shuffle of paper and the scribble of pens. Karen sat at the defense table with her son Tyler, her expression more rigid than ever. Across the aisle, Jake sat with his attorney, finally calm, but tense. After weeks of chaos, it had all come down to this. The judge, a middle-aged woman with piercing eyes and no patience for theatrics, looked over her glasses at the two parties. Mr. Matthews, she said, referring to Jake's attorney, you may proceed. Jake's lawyer stood confidently. Your Honor, this case is not just about a destroyed vehicle. It's about abuse of power, a pattern of manipulation, and one young man being encouraged by an HOA president to lie, trespass, and destroy what he didn't own. He walked over to the jury, clicking a remote that triggered a screen to drop down. Surveillance footage began to play the crystal clear video of Tyler jumping Jake's gate, sneaking into his garage, and joyriding the Lamborghini without permission. Then the crash, then Karen pulling up 15 minutes later, pulling him into her car like they were escaping a crime scene. There were gasps from the jury. Karen's attorney jumped up. Objection. That footage was not submitted for pre-trial evidence. It's admissible, the judge said coldly. It was filed within the allowable window last night. Continue. Jake's lawyer nodded. There's more. Exhibit B. He pulled out the HOA meeting transcripts, where Karen had publicly stated Jake was careless and left his garage open. But this was quickly followed by Exhibit C, photos from Jake's security system, proving the garage was closed and locked before Tyler broke in. The room tensed. Karen was visibly rattled, her usual smug expression cracking. Tyler looked ready to crawl under the table. Lastly, Your Honor, we'd like to submit this email thread. Jake's lawyer continued, between Karen and several other board members, where she plotted to force Jake out of the neighborhood. This wasn't about safety or property values. It was personal. She even admitted verbatim, that car makes our neighborhood look like a rapper's house. The courtroom broke into hushed whispers. Jake finally allowed himself a small breath of relief. It was all finally out there. Karen's attorney tried to shift blame, claiming Tyler was a minor influenced by neighborhood dynamics, and that Jake had been antagonistic by flaunting wealth. But the jury wasn't buying it. 3 days later, the verdict came down. Tyler was found liable for grand theft auto and property destruction. Karen was ordered to step down from the whole board and was held responsible for encouraging the cover-up, leading to charges of obstruction and conspiracy. She was also ordered to pay restitution to Jake, not just for the Lamborghini damages, but for legal costs and emotional distress when Jake walked out of the courthouse. Neighbors he hadn't spoken to in months lined the sidewalk. Some clapped. A few offered apologies. Even Sandra, who had once refused to make eye contact, gave him a hug. Reporters gathered. But Jake didn't stop to talk. He walked past the cameras, got into his temporary vehicle, and drove home. A few days later, something remarkable happened. A package arrived at Jake's doorstep from the luxury car dealership he had originally bought the Lamborghini from. Inside was a handwritten letter. "We saw what happened on the news," it read, "and after watching how you handled yourself under pressure, we'd like to invite you to test drive our latest model on us. No strings attached. We believe some cars choose their owners." Jake chuckled, shaking his head. Maybe the world wasn't so bad after all. That weekend, Karen's house went up for sale. The neighborhood voted unanimously to restructure the HOA leadership, with transparency measures installed to prevent another dictatorship like Karen's. Jake was even asked to consider running for the board himself. He declined. He didn't want to police lawns or measure mailbox heights. He just wanted to live in peace, without someone blaming him for things he didn't do. But he left them with one final suggestion during the last meeting he attended: install cameras at every entry point in the neighborhood, not just to prevent crime, but to ensure accountability. As Jake stood on his porch weeks later, sipping coffee, a sleek new car pulled into his driveway. Not a Lamborghini this time, but something quieter, stealthier, more fitting. And as he looked across the street at Karen's now empty house, he smiled. Justice, after all, had its own kind of horsepower.